Okay, first of all, if you are familiar with the stuff that I put out, you will know that I love dispelling corset myths. There is not many things that infuriate me more than people trying to perpetuate a narrative in which corsets are those deathly machines made of steel in which you cannot move. If you ended up here accidentally and you still think they are, I will link up some of my videos in the description so you can have a look. You just know I am the first one to be angry when I hear about broken and bruised ribs, deformed skeletons, stomachs cut in half, tight lacing being the norm. If there is someone that will scream at nonsense like that, that is me. That will be me always. It's been a couple of years now that I have started putting out videos dispelling or trying to dispel corset myths. I have seen how, together with other creators dealing with the same topic, I think we managed to shift the narrative a little bit. Because now, under every piece of media that contains some bullshit corset-related misinformation, people in the comment section will point it out. However, because it is still very much a topic that you need to fight people on and constantly bring up historical proof that corsets were not in fact torture devices, they were underwear. Because of that, I tend to omit some of the nuances because I feel like if I bring it up in the conversation, it's gonna diminish the point I'm trying to make. And also, I have seen people go the opposite direction and claim that you could not feel corsets at all and they did not mean to reduce your waist at all. And every time someone complains about them being uncomfortable, we flock to the comment section being like, actually, I think in general, when there is a popular discourse, we tend to sway way too far one way or another. And by trying to correct the direction that it's swaying in, we overcompensate and we go from corsets were torture devices that killed women to corsets did nothing wrong and in fact, women were crying of joy wearing them, which is also not true. This video is sponsored by Juice Journey. Juice Journey is a hidden object mystery game set in the 1920s. The main character, June, is trying to solve a family mystery, and a bunch of other mysteries to be fair. What I love about June's journey is that there is always something to do and there is so many things you could do. So you obviously have the hidden object scenes, but you also have your own little island that you get to decorate, or an album full of stickers. You can participate in clubs with your friends, and you also get special events. And this July, June's Journey offers you a journey, haha, across the 1920s American Midwest. You can unlock exclusive events and help June find museum artifacts that have vanished. You also get to investigate a complicated family situation, and who doesn't love that? So download June's Journey using the link in the description or scan the QR code that appears on screen. So today, let's balance that a little bit and let's focus on everything that's wrong with the history of corsets. Starting off strong with classism, my guys. Probably one of my least favorite aspects of the historical custom of wearing corsets by Western women is how it was a requirement. Obviously, there was no law regulating it, but it was heavily judged if you were not wearing one. A huge part of 19th century mentality was maintaining your reputation and avoiding anything that could cast a shadow on it. And going around corsetless was definitely one of those things because people could tell you have boobs. That's a no-no. We're not going there. There were, of course, small groups that were exempt from this unwritten rule, such as the wealthy old ladies that just didn't care, or extremely impoverished that no one cared about anyway. But the truth is, there was definitely immense social pressure to wear a corset as a Western woman. And the truth is, even dress reformers who were actively going against being in any way held back by their clothing, they still continue to wear corsets in most cases while also criticizing them. And it is left to us to speculate how much of it was that they didn't mind it and how much of it was societal pressure from a very young age. In fact, it was such an important part of being a woman that in many diaries, girls note the moment they got their first proper corset, which usually just means a heavier boned one that closed and opened with a bust. So even though the corset itself wasn't restricting women's freedom, the moral obligation to wear one was definitely restricting women's freedom not to wear it. So as someone who has worn corsets, obviously if it's made to your measurements and it's in good condition, it is comfortable. But many a corset of mine has started falling apart to the point where boning was sticking out. And it usually happens when you're on your way somewhere, 7 layers of skirts, and you feel the boning slowly poking into your inner thigh. And that, my dudes, is not fun. So there are cases when it's just not comfortable. Sometimes you eat too much and you're at a table and you're like, God damn, I did not keep that in mind making that evening dress. How the hell am I gonna loosen my corset now? And it just becomes a nuisance. So I can imagine wearing a poorly fitted one, wearing a one with rips and tears and the boning poking out. That must have been really annoying. Also, when I wear a corset, I genuinely don't mind, but when I take it off, I usually do feel a difference. And in several situations, in extreme heat, being short of breath, or just generally uncomfortable, I can imagine a corset not being the garment that I want on myself at that moment. I think it's one of those things though where if you were conditioned to think it is an absolute must to wear a corset every day, you would not have even considered what it's like not wearing one. Like it would not even cross your mind. And it's also important to note that while corsets could cause discomfort, they also helped with the discomfort that was brought by other garments. They protected the hips from the weight of the skirts and provided breast support. So to me, the question of the comfort of corsetry is a very individual issue, which of course wasn't respected at the time when not wearing it was not really a viable option for most women. Let's also keep in mind the historical neurodivergent people. May they rest in peace finally, because they sure as hell were not peaceful, as they were overstimulated by the constant feeling of being wrapped around the torso like a boned burrito. I mean, there is a huge reason why part of the dress reform movement was the corset. It is interesting though that the same amount of attention was brought, that was a voice crack, the same amount of attention was brought to just the general feeling of tightness in women's clothing. Because when you look at Victorian dresses, the bodices often look like second skin. In 1862 book Dress Reform, LMAOOO complains about both the corsetry and the cut of the dresses. Dresses are made so snug about the shoulders and the sleeves set in so low on the arm as to hinder the free movement of the arms and chest. Not infrequently, ladies take them off to comb their hair, as they cannot easily raise their arms in them. She also makes an interesting point about tight lacing and says not many women do it and it's considered vain and unchristian-like. Tight lacing, I know, has been consigned to oblivion as a relic of barbarism. Little does she know that it's still mid-19th century and it's gonna come back in full speed by the end of it. The corsets in our shop windows, to the contrary, notwithstanding. Of course, nobody laces nowadays in this Christian land. For who would thus deform the image of God? Yet truth bids me say that as small as the number may be among intelligent people who purposely lace or girt in their chest, the number is fewer still who so dress as to give the vital organs perfect freedom necessary to carry on the functions of life harmoniously. So she's saying most people are wearing their corsets too tight for her liking. Not very Christian of them. Speaking of tight lacing, let's face it, there is plenty of modern day garments, devices, activities that if practiced moderately, they will most likely leave you unharmed. However, if you bring it to the extreme, you might get extreme results. And we know very well there is always someone that decides to go that way. It just statistically makes sense. Add to that the poor state of Victorian psychology and a sprinkle of untreated mental illness, and you get a decent chunk of people that tight-laced to the point it brought them physical harm. When you look at famous tight-lacers like Sissy, a lot of them have history of what we nowadays interpret as a mental illness or an eating disorder. I'm not saying that everyone that tight-laces is mentally ill, but I'm saying those historically obsessed with corsetry to the point of bodily harm, they often had underlying issues with themselves or with their body image in general. So because of the social expectations to be corseted as a woman, an uncorseted natural body was considered vulgar and just not very attractive. I can imagine that was not a great feeling if you were trying to exist as a fat person. There was a brief trend in the 1870s where a bent bust gave an illusion of a belly, but that was probably the only time in corset's history when the silhouette was anything but a tiny flat waist. Most of the time you didn't even necessarily have to be skinny, but your waist absolutely had to be small. And you could of course help yourself with the aid of padding and proportions and visual tricks. But at the end of the day, a big belly was just not desirable and it had to remain hidden. Corseted bodies were also a beauty standard that was very white-centered. And in a lot of places, a corseted silhouette could have been used as a sort of racial divide. It was the corset that differentiated the local people from the colonizers. And if a woman of color was trying to adopt the Western customs, she had to adopt the corseted dress. Traditional clothing of so many cultures was considered savage and loose, not only because it belonged to people that were considered inferior, but also because it allowed the waist and the belly stay unrestricted. So these are most of the issues I have historically with corsets, with the social expectation to wear corsets, and with the whole idea of corsetry as sort of a tool to control women. As we well know, corsets were also actually hated by people that were anti-feminist, people that were not into women's rights. So weirdly, the narrative that we tend to repeat, which is corsets were oppressive to women, is literally what an oppressive person would say in the 19th century. So I'm always a little careful when talking about corsetry because I don't want to sound like a conservative 19th century dude that's like, these are harmful to you. Modesty first. But also I think realistically we need to keep those things in mind every time we talk about corsets. And they are at the back of my head. Hopefully they'll be at the back of your head now. Thank you and bye. Also, don't forget to download June's journey using the link in the description or the QR code shown on screen. Bye!